Hello, my wonderful, wonderful friends. Welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge, where you get to hear stories about people getting what they deserve. Guys, I hope you're having a great day today, wherever you may be, and in this episode, I've got one long story. It's a long story that many people in the comments of the post say that it would even qualify as nuclear revenge. So with that said, I hope you stay for the story today, and do hit that subscribe button for future revenge stories. Let's dive in. This was about 9 years ago. I, a 48-year-old female, have an extremely beautiful 35-year-old niece named Emma on my husband's side. She's a head-turner. She's very approachable, humble, and very smart. She's also very shy and has trouble asserting herself and enforcing boundaries. So, I used to know a guy named Dean, who's now 51 years old from my first marketing job. We worked in the same building. Most youngsters knew each other and usually had lunch together at the lobby cafe. He was a very cool guy, super funny and likable. He was clear in his goal of becoming a business owner. Eventually, our small group kind of disbanded, and I moved on and slowly lost touch with my clique. Fast forward, and I'm married and actively looking to expand our business. I bumped into Dean at a dentist appointment. We exchanged updates while in the waiting room. He now owned a small business services company. I looked into his website and decided to give his services a try. He became our regular supplier, and our working relationship brought him lots of referrals. Basically, we indirectly helped him build his business. I had my niece Emma apply for a job at his company as he was actively looking for new workers. She was hired as a little bit of everything employee. The pay wasn't great, but she was only one course short of graduating and wanted to build her resume. For about a year, our work routine involved paying him good steady money for extremely professionally done services, such as payroll, accounting, etc. One day, Dean introduced us to Charlie. He had been complaining that his business was getting slower and slower, and Charlie was some sort of a consultant. I use the term some sort because his actual scope wasn't clear. Charlie seemed like an okay guy, very formal and polite, with just the right balance between seriousness and smiles. We were invited to a business meeting so that Dean could discuss some stuff and hear our input. This wasn't rare. Dean and I had been avid brainstormer partners, and our sessions helped each other back when we first met. We had periodical discussions after we reconnected. I wouldn't discuss my business with him for ethical reasons, but I didn't mind hearing him out and perhaps offering my opinion. That meeting, Charlie and Dean presented a business opportunity, but my husband and I passed. At the end of dinner, everyone pitched in, but the tab was $90 short. Charlie apologized for not having money on him and directly asked my husband to cover him. We covered his portion because we felt that we were put on the spot. I made up my mind that if the guy didn't pay us back, I would have Dean reimburse the expense. My husband and I left the restaurant and we discussed the dinner surprise. We decided to drop it to avoid getting paranoid. We really didn't know the guy, and Dean didn't seem bothered at all. Charlie paid us immediately, like at 10 o'clock the next morning, and he was contrite and apologetic. Charlie then became a fixture at Dean's office, and Dean had a change in behavior. He seemed hungry and thirsty for fast money schemes and quick success. They spent the day on meetings about mostly every MLM in the book. With Dean constantly out of his office, the quality of services dropped significantly. Dean's office had become some sort of a meeting place for the corner cutters, the alpha male wannabes, and the people who think, I'm gonna succeed fast and rub it on the face of each person who has called me incompetent. Our frequent dinner meetings thinned out. Charlie's true character began to surface. He made sexist jokes, ethnic jokes, talked down at people, and started to raise his voice. Once, he took a sip of my niece's Coke and she was disgusted, so she gave it to him and got a new one. Unfortunately, my niece became Dean's formal assistant, so she had to attend every meeting, sometimes until very late hours, and I began to wonder if she was getting paid for the extra hours, but I thought I could be wrong and did not want to interfere. We declined every invitation if we knew Charlie would be there. We had signed up for only 3 years of services, and canceled on other services where customer quality had declined. It worked out. Then we paid Dean $10,000 for installing our new platform, with control over our own use of technology. 3 weeks went by, and we still couldn't use the platform. It didn't support multiple users as needed, and we required someone from Dean's company to visit on a daily basis because we couldn't get it running. Annoyed at the situation, we simply asked for the money back. Dean agreed, and paid us $2,000 and promised the other $8,000 in installments. I asked for a personal meeting because I needed the whole thing resolved. We had paid our money, had no service, and we still had to wait to get a full refund? Really? By then, Charlie had taken full control and was running the show. Crucial employees were randomly getting fired, and Charlie yelled at everyone and made decisions with Dean never saying a word. My niece looked unhappy. Dean had her carry his suitcase and had her constantly serve Charlie some coffee. I also did not appreciate the crude jokes he directed at her either. Dean did nothing about it. As time went on, too many things weren't adding up. Charlie painted himself quite the 007 type. He was a former college professor, a former business owner, and a former marketing director. He spent months away from home and dramatically described one fateful New Year's Eve that he spent alone on a plane as the final straw that caused the end of his marriage, as he was such a workaholic. He was a fast talker and a great storyteller. He claimed long motorcycle rides in exotic places such as Italy, and yet he had no car and was living at a friend's house and showed limited proficiency. When I pressed for my money, Charlie went ballistic. He tried to put me in a corner and tried to intimidate me. He asked, "Are you a software expert? Are you? Because if you were, you wouldn't need our services. Answer my question or shut up and stop talking, because you don't know what you're doing." I started to answer that I wasn't an expert, and he quickly replied, "Then shut your mouth." I got up and told him that I'm no expert, but I'm the paying client. I warned him to watch his mouth and that he would not get a second warning. And sadly, my relationship with Dean was strained and he did not stand up for me, neither as a friend or as a client. I told Dean I would never again deal with Charlie. I canceled all accounting and payroll services immediately. I had zero trust. Right away, I researched Charlie's background. None of his corporate experience checked out, but he had an extensive criminal record. His record included gender violence, bank and wire fraud, securities fraud, patrimonial crimes, and a pending arrest warrant that dated 8 years prior. I sent all this information to Dean, and he never replied. I urged my niece to leave her job, but she decided to wait, to end her semester and then get another job, which was a bad decision. She said that Dean owed her for a lot of overtime, and leaving her job would almost guarantee that she would never see that money. Out of the blue, Dean contacted me with a solution. He gave me an unconvincing apology and asked me to meet him and an excellent software company owner who could help. I insisted on getting my refund, but he promised that he would cover the expense. I addressed Charlie's criminal past, and he said he did not know, but had confronted Charlie and cut ties for good. And it turns out he lied. So with Dean, I met this lady. Her name was Frances, and she was hostile, standoffish, and showed a superiority complex. Apparently she owned a yacht, multiple real estates, and had a presence across many states. I left when the meeting was over without an actual resolution that I had hoped for. She hardly mentioned anything about software. Frances talked a big game on other topics, so I researched her and found lots of questionable information. I asked Dean directly if she was in any way connected to Charlie. He offered a vague answer of, "I don't know, it could be." When I pressed him for a yes or no, he said, "I can't compromise the integrity of my success by indulging in your unfounded assumptions." As it was, Dean's business was drying up. He saw Frances as his savior. She engaged him to help her set up one of her big companies and would pay him $750,000 total. She would also pay him $2,000 a week for 6 months just to do some company creation work. On the side, I had a software engineer install a new system. Our initial intention was to get Dean's software up and running to avoid the additional cost of a new installation. The engineer informed me that the software could not possibly run because it was a knockoff from an outdated system. He advised me to file a complaint for fraud. Some more research led me to the conclusion that Dean had inflated his company's capacity for specialty software, and thus, he also inflated the price. From what we paid him, he took $2,000 for himself and gave Charlie $8,000 to get whatever garbage they could sell me. This is exactly why I could not get my $8,000 back, and Frances was their source of software. I notified Dean that due to the nature of his relationship with a felon, we were canceling all remaining services. My niece got fired that afternoon, and Dean's excuse was her refusal to give Charlie a ride. Emma ended up coming to me and my husband. She was scared and very emotional. She explained that when I gave Dean my canceling notice, she was in his car and was about to get out and enter the office. Dean slammed the door so hard the car shook. She was so perplexed, and it took her a few seconds to get out, so Dean opened the door and yelled, "Get out!" The situation with Charlie had also escalated. Emma addressed this at work, but Dean's response was, "Grow up, toughen up. And how do you expect to make it in this cutthroat world if you're gonna be so sensitive?" Charlie's jokes also became overtly sexual and explicit. In one incident a few months earlier, Charlie was drunk after yet another failed business meeting. Dean had ordered Emma to drive Charlie home, and he tried to assault her during the ride. He claimed he couldn't remember, and therefore, it never happened. This time, she refused to be Charlie's driver and a potential victim. Dean fired her after ranting about how Charlie was being targeted by losers and faithless know-it-alls. He got into a power trip and became verbally abusive, calling her a Miss Goody Two-Shoes and reminding her that she had been able to eat the whole time she worked for him because he paid her out of pity. He emailed her that due to her insubordination, lack of honesty, and malicious manipulation, her duties were terminated, effective immediately. After hearing all of this, my husband and I stepped up to support her. We paid a good lawyer. This was no longer just about money. I went straight to the restaurant where Dean and Charlie routinely held their meetings, and I confronted Dean in front of his clients and warned Charlie that his luck had ended. I became very attentive to detail. I researched all types of records and found that Charlie had jumped his probation and the arrest warrant was still in effect. The legal system had failed miserably at finding him. He had felonies in multiple states, and the supposed time doing business overseas was actually jail time. Emma proved her case on sexual harassment, and Dean had to pay $15,000 in owed salary and punitive damages, and he had to pay some fines. With that, I contacted as many of his former employees as possible who were fired and encouraged them to sue Dean. 3 of them actually did, and 1 of them won. I wanted him under legal and financial strain. He was ordered to refund my money plus legal costs, and the judge did not accept his whole "but it's Charlie's fault" excuse. My contract was direct with Dean, not Charlie. He also had to pay me for breach of confidentiality because Charlie wasn't his employee, nor was he a legally bound business partner. The court had opened a new investigation over potential financial fraud and theft of information, identity, etc., as Dean had access to clients' accounting and payroll information with lots of data. A new order of apprehension was issued against Charlie, but he ran. The judge ordered Dean's business permanently closed, and a forfeiture notice was issued. A while later, I saw on Facebook that Dean had been invited as a guest lecturer at a nearby college. That's funny because Dean had never actually finished college, and I knew this from the beginning. I contacted the college and voiced my concern over an unqualified professor teaching at their institution. They ended up announcing a different professor for the course without any explanation. During that fall, a former coworker called my niece to give her the news that Frances had been arrested by the feds for a fraud scheme. And the best part is, she stopped paying the $2,000 a week early, but kept stringing Dean along for free work. I sent a formal notice to all the companies that I had referred him to, and explained that I could no longer recommend his services. I added a copy of our own lawsuit for reference, and companies were dropping from his business like flies. Other lawsuits started popping up for dishonest services. This set a chain of events that led to his downfall. Dean had some car repo situations back when the business began to fail. I called the company and told them where to find him and at what time. This was easy, because although he had closed shop, he and Charlie kept eating at the same restaurant. I wasn't there to see it, but I could confirm his car was towed. Dean's marriage broke apart, and he then faced charges for selling and profiting from illegal software and got probation. Dean lost his home and illegally occupied a portion of the abandoned commercial building next to his former office. I leaked this info in an anti-gentrification regional Facebook group. The zone was under scrutiny because residents were being pushed away. He used the spot as a small office and living quarters. The residents wanted it as a community center. They held a protest right in front of the building. The police eventually came and he was charged with trespassing and stealing electricity from nearby buildings. Goodbye probation. Charlie was harder to nail. He disappeared for years. I could not find him, but his mistake was gaining some confidence. His social media became moderately active and he claimed to own some bogus business. He never appeared in any of his picture posts, which made me wonder whether he was posting from inside a jail or something. But I went to his aunt's profile and discovered that she posted regularly with some pictures showing him at family gatherings. I found out via her comments that he now had a young child and his legs were amputated from too much drinking. Same bad person, same freaking liar. On one of his pictures, he had the caption, "Happy birthday, dear son, even though cold-hearted people are keeping us apart." With this, I found out he had an unpaid child support case. I anonymously contacted both the baby mama and the child support division. I gave them everything, his aunt's address and every freaking place I knew he visited. Charlie was eventually arrested and new charges were filed, including sexual battery and financial abuse of a mentally ill adult. My case against him lasted almost 2 years, and I only recovered $3,000 out of the $8,000 he took. But seeing him all pale and listening to his trembling voice during the court hearings was satisfaction enough. The case took a toll on his already weakened health as I watched his hands tremble. He cried and got ill when he was sentenced. He kind of just dropped his head and became super pale. I remember the judge's opening sentence. "I'm tired of this case. In over 10 years, I read your name in multiple warrants, and yet, you avoid responsibility, forcing us to spend taxpayer money tracking you. What's wrong with you? You pled and bring up your health problems, but none of that deterred you from stealing, abusing, and debilitating the integrity of those under your influence." He served 4 years out of a 36-year sentence and died in 2019. Guys, and that wraps up today's episode. Let me know what you guys thought. Was OP in the right for going scorched earth? And does this revenge dip into nuclear revenge territory? Guys, if you missed the last episode of r/ProRevenge, OP's boss wants a promotion, but OP decides to get him demoted instead. Guys, check it out if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.